Today you will be viewing our year-end processing in Microsoft Dynamics SL, and our presenter will be Melanie. She's on our Dynamics SL support staff, and she's one of our payroll specialists. So she will be reviewing all you need to know about year-end processing with you. Just a couple housekeeping items. You are all on mute, so please put your questions in the question pane, and Melanie will answer all your questions at the end of the session. So if you have a question, put it in the pane and she'll come back and answer it at the end of the session. We are already recording our session, so you can view this on the Plumline website if you need to review it maybe next week, or if somebody else in your department needs to view it, they can go to the Plumline website on our YouTube channel and it will be posted there. With that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Melanie and she will start your presentation. Melanie?
Thanks, Valerie. On our agenda for today, we're going to look at applying the year-end updates provided by Microsoft Dynamics. Also, we'll look at some of the year-end processing and general steps to get you through the year-end in regards to the payroll module, project controller, and also accounts payable. Microsoft will be providing year-end updates for the following Dynamics SL versions. This includes SL 2018, as well as 2018 CU1, CU2, and CU3, as well as SL 2015, SL 2015 CU1, and CU2. We'll begin here with applying the year-end updates that are provided by Microsoft. The first step is to download the updates via the Microsoft Customer Source or Partner Source website. This site does require that you have valid credentials to get into the download, so if you don't have access to that, you'll want to reach out to either Microsoft directly or you can reach out to your partner to get assistance with getting access in there. Now, once on your website, you're going to select Dynamics SL as the product and locate then the year-end updates download for 2019. Typically, it's going to be under the SL Service Packs area. I've also had success if you just search on Dynamics SL and 2019 year-end updates, it'll typically return results for you that way as well. You're going to then want to install via the instructions that are included with the downloaded zip file. I caution you, make sure you're following instructions for your specific version of Dynamics SL. As noted, there's different versions that they're providing these updates for, and sometimes those instructions will differ just a little bit depending upon the version that you're running. In prior years, Microsoft has sometimes released a YouTube video that will walk you through the instructions step by step. I'm not certain they're going to do that this year or not, as these updates are not yet available. But if you are looking for some assistance and want to venture out there and take a look, see if there's a video, you may be able to find some extra guidance out there to help walk you through that. Otherwise, by all means, your partner should be able to assist you with getting those installed as well. You want to make sure that all users exit Dynamics SL before you apply the updates. And then also make sure you back up your SL system and application databases, as well as any custom reports that you might have within your SL installation. Now, as far as the exact installation steps, I don't have those just simply because these year-end updates have not yet been released for 2019. But basing it on the steps that have been used to install year-end updates in prior years, typically it's going to be installed directly at the server versus at one of your workstations. And then you would locate the directory for your version that you're running within the download and run the installation executable. That's going to copy over new screens and maybe reports to the necessary SL directory structure on your server. In the past, there's also been a SQL script provided that may need to be ran in SQL Server Management Studio. So you may need access to SQL Server as well to fully get everything applied. Now, you might wonder what all updates are included in these year-end updates that we speak of. Generally speaking, you're going to see any current year reports, any year-end resolutions, so any changes that might need to be done to make sure your processing and reports are correct, any electronic file changes or any changes to the AP 1099 forms, also any changes to the W-2s. Now, as far as updates for 2019 year, like I said, it's not yet been released, but we've got some information as to what changes are included in this download. In regards to the W-2 form itself, there were some changes regarding the Box 9 verification code. This is no longer in use, so the title for that field is going to be removed from the form and the box will become shaded. The W-3 form that prints along with the W-2s, just the totaling, there were no changes required to that particular form. There were also no changes required for the W-2 electronic file. Okay. Now I know there's been a lot of questions and stir regarding the new W-4 form. Dynamics SL itself doesn't do anything with the W-4 form itself, but in regards to that, the tax tables, there's going to be a new higher set of tax tables. There's 4 new ones to support the 2020 tax tables. There's also, and those will be included with the quarterly tax updates that Microsoft provides, so be on the lookout for that. We'll cover that in a little more detail here later. There's also support for a new dependent claim amount. This is a new field that's going to be added to the employee maintenance screen in the payroll module. It'll also be taken into consideration then during the payroll calculation process. There's also a message that's going to be added to the employee maintenance screen, and this will be there to advise the payroll clerk on the correct number of personal exemptions to enter and which set of tax tables to use, whether it's the standard tax tables or those with the higher rate. And that's going to be based on the selections made by the employee on their new W-4 form. So that's all that will be contained in these updates once they become available. Now, it is recommended that the year-end updates be applied after you have closed the payroll module for the year. There's going to be the year-end update, and then as I just mentioned momentarily, there's a separate tax table update released by Microsoft. The tax table updates for the new 2020 year should be applied after the payroll module has been closed for the current 2019 year. The updates include that information that we previously discussed. The tax table updates provide changes to the tax tables that are used by your SL payroll deductions. There can be a few different releases of the tax table updates over the course of the year as these tax tables change. The most current update, I think that I found on the Microsoft download page, was dated 9/30 of 19, and that was relating to something with the Virginia specifically. These year-end updates are typically released into the December timeframe. I would expect them to be coming very soon. Tax table updates are typically released a little bit later, maybe late December, early January. Now, I will point out that this year, with these 4 new higher set of tax tables that are included or going to be necessary for the new 2020 year, these year-end updates are going to be dependent on these payroll tax table updates being installed as well. This has not been the case in years prior, but this year it's going to be required, so keep that in mind. Now, there's a few items to take into consideration as you're working on your year-end processing in Dynamics SL. You're required to do the calendar year processing in payroll and accounts payable, even if you're on a fiscal year setup. You can post entries to prior periods as needed. So, and that's even if the periods are closed. Now, that's standard Dynamics SL. Please be aware that your setup will require you to allow such postings to close periods and years. So there are some setup options in the GL setup screen in the General Ledger module that can restrict users' ability to post to closed periods and or years. So you'll want to double check your setup and make sure, if you do need to post back, that your setup is allowing for that. There's also third-party add-ons that could potentially be installed on top of Dynamics SL that impact the ability to post back to closed periods and years too. So keep that in mind. The W-2 and 1099 amounts are updated based on check date. So as you're verifying numbers on W-2s and 1099s, just keep that in mind. It's all based on the check date that's issued. Now, you may have noticed that the year-end updates that Microsoft provides are available for the SL 2015 and 2018 versions. If you do happen to still be running on an SL 2011 version, Plumline Consulting is offering a year-end package for the SL 2011 FP1, SP2, and SP3 versions. Again, that's SP1, SP2, and SP3 versions specifically. This is based on an annual subscription. This is going to contain all of the same year-end updates that are released for the SL 2015 and 2018 versions. They're just recreated and packaged for these 2011 versions. If you would like more information on the solution, you can reach out to us at vborak@plumlineconsulting.com. Valerie would be glad to help you out with that. The pricing for the solution is based on number of employees and vendors. So if it's under 100, the price is $1,500. Over 100 is $2,500. Also, I did want to point out, too, if you are on SL 2015 version, this is the last year that the year-end updates will be included in your maintenance with Microsoft. Moving on, we're going to take a closer look at the payroll module. So the typical flow for year-end processing in the payroll module includes closing the year for payroll in the GL closing screen, reconciling the 941 and unemployment reports. You want to print the W-2s to plain paper so you can review the calculated amounts. You would edit any W-2 data as needed. You can do that in employee W-2 history or in initialized mode, printing the actual W-2 forms, and then generating the electronic file. Let's visit these items in a little bit more detail here. So first, you'll want to confirm that all the data for 2019 has been entered and processed. And then you can go and review the payroll batch register report to make sure that all the batches have been released and posted. You don't have anything sitting out there that needs processed yet. Then reconcile your payroll accounts in Payroll with your general ledger account balance. And some reports that are useful in doing that would be the account distribution report and the GL trial balance report. Those become very useful. You would want to print any period end reports, such as your 941 quarterly tax worksheet, the unemployment tax worksheet, or even your earnings and deduction reports. And then at this point, you're ready to do the actual year-end closing process in Payroll. So this is done in the closing screen, which is found within the General Ledger module. And the December period of your fiscal year is always going to be closed with the closing type of year. So we have two options for the closing. It's either period or year. So whenever you reach the period that corresponds to December calendar year, that's when you're going to choose the closing type of year. And what that does is the closing will cycle the payroll to the new calendar year for you. It'll also create deductions for the new year and then history records for the prior year. And that's going to allow you then to calculate checks for the new calendar year. If you do not run this process and you try to calculate checks for the new year, you will receive messages indicating that deductions do not exist for that year yet. So that'll be your indicator that you need to go out and close that year. You do want to make sure that you clear all calculations in Payroll before closing the year. This can cause some errors in the new year too if they're left out there and you try and calculate in the new year. An important note to reiterate, just make sure that you close Payroll before you run calculations for the new year. Here's a screenshot of the closing screen itself. The year option on the Payroll module is selected, and then you would just click the Begin Processing button. The screen is designed so that it will not allow you to make an invalid selection. So in this instance, December equals period 12 in my fiscal year. So I made the selection of closing type equals year, click Begin Processing. If I accidentally chose period instead of year, the system will pop up a warning message indicating it's not a proper selection, and it does not allow you to proceed making that selection. So it'll be sure to alert you. Now here is a high-level overview for the W-2 steps for year-end processing. And we'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail next. So just high-level overview. First, we would apply the year-end updates, and then the W-2s get calculated. You want to review the data on those W-2 forms just to make sure that the information contained on them is accurate. And then if you do find any items that need addressed, you would make edits or corrections as needed. The W-2 forms would then get printed. And then lastly would be the creation of the electronic file if you're filing electronically. So once the year-end updates have been applied, you're ready to move forward with doing the W-2 calculations. We would open the W-2 calculation screen, which is in the Payroll module. You would choose the current W-2 year that you're processing for, to enter that in the calendar year field, and then select the pay groups that you wish to calculate for. So in the pane in the top right corner there, you're selecting the pay groups. And as you select those pay groups, the employees that are contained within those pay groups are going to populate in the lower employee grid on the bottom half of the screen. You would select the employees that you wish to calculate for and click Begin Processing. It will populate the tables then that are needed to print the W-2 forms and create the electronic file if you're filing electronically. We'll take a deeper look at reviewing the data and the calculations now. So once the calculation is completed, you can print the forms to review the data for each employee. You could print it to file, open it up in Word document, or maybe you just choose to print it to plain paper, just so you can review that information before you use up your forms when you print those. You can also print using the plain paper copy format, and this will actually print the boxes for you. You could also use the W-2 employee history screen, which is what I have a screenshot of here, and you can use that to review the data that was calculated for the individual employees. You would just need to bring up each individual employee this way, whereas if you printed to paper or file, you would be able to see all employees on that report. So this is just useful for troubleshooting purposes and tying out numbers before we print the forms. Now, if you do determine that corrections need to be made on the W-2s, we need to first try to determine what's causing it to be incorrect. And there's several potential causes for situations like that. If the federal wages are what appear to be incorrect, we would want to take a look and identify any earnings types that may be set up incorrectly. Look for any missing exemptions that maybe should exist. And if any such items are found, we would want to correct the setup, and then you can rerun the W-2 calculation process and review those amounts again. Now, if it's the state wages that appear incorrect, we again would want to identify any earnings types that may be set up incorrectly, any missing exemptions that might need to exist, and if any items are found with this scenario, then we have a couple options for resolving. One would be to use initialized mode to correct the year-to-date subject wages in the employee history screen. You would make those to be correct and then rerun the W-2 calculation process. Or you could use initialized mode to correct the state wages in the employee W-2 history screen. And with this route, you would not recalculate the W-2s. Now, if a tax amount is found to be incorrect, we would want to take a look to see if the cause of the problem is with the federal, state, or local taxes, and make sure that the federal deductions are properly coded as type equal federal in the deduction maintenance screen. Also, if it's state deductions, those should be properly coded with a type equal state in deduction maintenance, and the appropriate two-letter state code is included in the deduction maintenance screen. And also any local taxes, those should be coded as a type equal local, and the appropriate two-letter state code would be entered on those in the deduction maintenance screen as well. Now, for tax amounts that were not taken properly, you could initialize the tax amounts to be correct. Some important notes: it's key to correct any setup issues to avoid problems the following year. So if we find something that's off, let's get that corrected so that it doesn't continue to be a problem going forward. And you want to be careful when you're using initialized mode to modify the employee history screen. Just be very careful doing these kinds of things. If you have any doubt or question on what you're doing, always reach out to your partner or support to determine the best approach in resolving that. Here are some items to make note of with the W-2 calculation process. This process can be run at any time. You can do it before or after the year-end close has been completed, just as long as history is being retained for the year that you're calculating for. It's recommended that you go ahead and calculate the W-2s before the year is over, so you can get a feel for what those numbers are shaping up to be, see if you're on track, maybe something jumps out at you that you know needs to get resolved before we're actually ready to print those forms. The W-2s can be recalculated after your last check of the year has been ran, so that's not a problem at all. It'll include that. If you happen to have any inactive employees that have earnings or deductions for the W-2 year, those can be calculated and included as well. If you have any earnings types or deductions or deduction amounts that need to be printed in a specific box number on your W-2, you will want to go into the W-2 control tab on the earnings type maintenance screen, or if it's deduction, the deduction maintenance screen. And in there, you're going to indicate the box number and or letter. So remember, if your calendar year has already been closed, it's going to be necessary to use the deduction history screen versus the deduction maintenance screen. That way you're accessing and modifying the record for the prior year and that'll impact that year's W-2s. So if you've closed the year in payroll, you're now in 2020, and you need to make changes to something to impact the 2019 W-2s, make sure we're going into deduction history, deduction maintenance, deduction history or employee history to impact 2019, and then also do it in deduction maintenance or employee maintenance to impact 2020 and beyond then. If the employee W-2 history screen is being used to modify the W-2 information at all using initialized mode, and the W-2 calculation process is reran after that, it will override your changes. So if you've initialized anything and you want those changes to remain intact, you want to be sure in the W-2 calculation screen that you check the box to protect edited W-2 information. And that's going to make sure that those changes that you've made in initialized mode, that those remain intact for you when you recalculate. Also, if you happen to be missing a state employer ID number, you would want to go into the deduction maintenance screen, and the W-2 control tab is where you would key that in. If it's a federal employer ID number that you're missing, that comes from the company maintenance screen in Dynamics SL. So you can track it down there, make sure you've got the appropriate number or the one is entered in there. The W-2 forms report within the payroll module is what is used to print the actual W-2 forms. SL does not have the copy 1 and 2 report formats, but you can use the copy D instead. And SL uses a standard 2-part form, and it also offers a 4-part or 4-up format as well. You can also obtain pre-printed forms from a company called Deluxe. They've been providing these forms for years, and they line up quite nicely with the SLW2 format. You could also print these using your own forms. You would want to use the copy A, B, C, and D formats. And these formats are referred to as the plain paper copies. So they will print with the boxes as well as the numbers for you. Copy A is what is the federal copy, and that one must be in the scannable red ink. The copies B, C, and D, those are not required to be in that red ink. As far as creating the electronic file goes, you would want to generate your W-2 electronic file screen. That's what's used to create the file that's then provided to the IRS with your W-2 information. You would populate required fields on there. Those include the calendar year. You would specify the path to the file that's going to be created. I think it defaults into a specific directory, but you can change that path, and you just obviously want to make note of where that file is being saved to, as that's the one that you're going to reference and submit later to the IRS. There's also a transmitter PIN number that's provided by SSA, and then you would supply some contact person information in there. The company identification fields, the information there defaults in from the company maintenance screen in Dynamics SL. So if something looks like it's defaulting in incorrectly, you can trace that back to the company maintenance screen, maybe make corrections there, but you can also override it directly on the screen as well. Once you hit begin processing on the window, it will create a file called irstax.001. This is the file itself that's provided to the IRS. If you need to review that for some reason, you can open it in Notepad. There are instructions that are provided by SSA for transmitting the file. So just follow those and getting that transmitted. And the file format that's produced by Dynamics SL is usable by a program called AccuWage. And AccuWage is a free software provided by SSA that allows you to check the electronic file for formatting accuracy. So it identifies common format errors in the wage submissions and helps reduce submission rejections. So I do point out, though, it could be rejected for other errors. It does not verify names or social security numbers and that stuff. So, but it's very helpful in just making sure that the formatting itself is proper to get that submitted. Moving on to Project Controller. The steps for the year-end processing in Project Controller are going to include making sure that all the data has been entered for the current period, and also that all modules have been closed for the current period in the General Ledger closing screen. Now, it's too easy to make a mistake when you're running your allocations or billing, approving time, running your GL labor posting. Say, for example, you have time cards that have not been approved, And those will not post to the new period regardless of what period they have in week maintenance. So just in order to help with these sorts of things, it's recommended that you make sure the following items have been reviewed and processed as needed before we actually go through and perform the closing in Project Controller. One, we want to review the time cards. We want to complete the following processes, including the labor commitment load, the GL labor posting, and the pay labor interface. Continuing on, we want to review expense reports, run the FTT process, complete the revenue recognition and allocation processor, execute the billing transaction load, complete any invoicing. At that point, then, we can close the period. The Project Controller module must be closed at the end of each fiscal period, and the closing can be ran for the fiscal period or year end. So this is kind of similar to what we saw in the General Ledger GL closing screen. The closing here is performed, though, in the close period screen within the Project Controller module. So this is not done in the General Ledger screen as we do with the other modules in SL. This screen is going to perform a set of control tests. It checks that all your submodules have been posted to, that all the accounting modules are closed to any additional entries, also that all your project charge batches are posted, and if any exceptions are identified, the closing will be blocked. Also, it looks to make sure that the time cards, those are all reviewed, and a warning message will appear containing the number of unposted items being carried forward. Sometimes the closing screen will present warning messages. These are a little bit different than errors. If it's a warning, these items are not going to prevent you from closing the period or year. Now, if it's an error, those will prevent you from proceeding with the close, and those must be resolved before you can move ahead. If the close period screen in Project Controller detects that your current period is also the last period of your fiscal year, then the title on that window will change from, let's see here, if it's current period is the last period, then the title Begin Processing will change over to Begin Year-End Close, and it's going to close the year. Now, if a year-end close takes place, the balance forward amounts are calculated for those projects and have their balance forward switch on. Summary records are written for the new year. So here we have the close period screen, and like I said, this is going to detect if it's a year or a period closed. In this case, the current period is 11. Next period is going to become 12. So the Begin Processing button is just Begin Processing. It's doing a period close. On the other hand, if the current period is 12, the end of your fiscal year, and next period becomes period 1, the button changes to Begin Year-End Close. So the system identifies which selection needs made, a little bit different from the GL closing, kind of takes care of the selection for you. Prior to processing the closing, it is important to review the project maintenance record for open projects. And any projects that should have their balances carried forward, they should have the balance forward at year-end option selected. Balance forward at year-end is going to determine whether the year-end total of a project's budget and actuals are rolled forward as the beginning balance for the coming year during that year-end closing process. If you have projects that span multiple fiscal years, you should have this checkbox selected so that the year-end balance is rolled forward to the next year. Now, for annual projects, or those that are budgeted each year without regard to your previous years, this checkbox should be clear. And in that scenario, the beginning balance is set to 0 then for the next year. If your year is closed and some projects were found to not be marked as balance forward, the balances can be corrected by changing that current period in your Project Controller setup screen. You can actually set that back to the last period of the previous year. You then want to make sure that you mark that balance forward option in the project maintenance screen, and then you can run the closing process again. The Project Controller is a little bit forgiving in that sense that it will allow you to set the current period back and just go through that process once you've made this proper selection. Also in Project Controller, you want to review the fiscal period maintenance screen and make sure to set up fiscal periods for the new year. In the time and expense module, you would review the week maintenance to set up the week ending dates for the new year. Now we'll go ahead and take a look at accounts payable and your 1099 processing. So here we have an overview of the steps for year-end processing and AP. We want to review your open AP files, make sure we print the AP batch register report, and you would take a look at the batch statuses there, just looking for anything that may need processed yet. Also, go ahead and post your transactions in the GL Post Transaction screen. The vendor period trial balance report and also the period sensitive aged AP reports can be printed, and you can tie these reports to your GL trial balance report on the general ledger side. If you have recurring entries that you utilize in accounts payable, you want to make sure that those have been generated, released, and posted to the general ledger as well. I would also recommend printing the check register report and your aged AP reports out of AP, and then you can close the year in the GL closing screen. The last piece then is to close the 1099 calendar year. What that's going to do is to roll the two open 1099 years forward 1 year. As far as the 1099 processing, the 1099 calendar year control screen is what's used to maintain the two open 1099 years that SL allows you to have at any given time. The 1099 amounts can be manually updated using initialized mode. That's done in the AP vendor maintenance screen on the 1099 info tab. So if you happen to find that any 1099 amounts are incorrect, you would want to go into initialize mode into the vendor maintenance screen. It does require that your user has access rights to initialize mode in the particular screen vendor maintenance. So keep that in mind. The 1099 amounts are calculated based on the check date that's paying a voucher coded with a 1099 box number. Okay, so we enter a voucher and you attach a 1099 box number to it. When that voucher is paid, the check that pays it, the date of that check is when 1099 amounts are updated. There's a AP integrity check screen within Dynamics SL, and there's an option in there to rebuild 1099 amounts. This will only work if the setup is properly in place for 1099 information to be tracked. So that's going to mean that your 1099 vendors were properly coded as 1099 vendors, that your vouchers were properly coded with 1099 box numbers. So if you find out halfway through the year that a vendor wasn't properly coded as a 1099 vendor, or maybe vouchers were entered but they weren't properly coded with a 1099 box number, changing that setup halfway through the year and then going back and running the CA integrity check process is not going to catch that. So setup changes are not retroactive. Now in AP, we have a 1099 preview report and also a 1099 forms report. The two of these differ in that the 1099 preview report is going to show you all vendors that are marked as a 1099 vendor. It does not care the amounts paid to them. The 1099 forms report, though, is only going to print for those vendors that have hit the limit and require a form to be printed for them. 1099 amounts are going to be updated throughout the year. So as you have vouchers that have been coded with a 1099 box number, as those are paid, assuming, again, the vendor is flagged as a 1099 vendor and such, as those checks are issued against those vouchers coded with a 1099 box number, those 1099 amounts are going to accumulate in the vendor maintenance screen on the 1099 info tab. There's no extra processes required, no calculation process or anything like that to calculate that information. And you only need to run a process, I guess, if you're creating the electronic file for sending to the IRS. It's really the only process you may need to run. In accounts payable, you will go to the reports section and then click on the 1099 forms report. And you can preview the 1099 just using the 1099 preview report, or you can actually print the 1099 forms report. You can print that as many times as needed. It's not just a one and done. As mentioned before, though, that 1099 preview is going to show everyone, regardless of whether they've hit the limit or not. 1099 forms report is only going to print those that have hit the limit. The accounts payable module allows you to have two 1099 years open at any given time. Typically, the prior year is left open, and then the current year is open as well, so that would make up your 2 years. For example, we might have the current year set to 2018 right now. That could remain open, and then 2019 is on screen, actually coded as next year. As you roll into 2020 fiscal year, though, we would roll the 1099 years. So we would then end up with 2019 and 2020 as your two open years. When you print the forms, the 1099 forms, 2019 or the oldest year is the one that the system defaults to printing. There's a selection, I'll show you that upcoming here, that you need to check if it's going to be for the next year, the most recent of the two open years. So this is the 1099 forms report, and on the options tab here is an option for next 1099 year. So the more current of your two open 1099 years, if that's the one you need to print forms for, you need to come here to the options tab and check the next 1099 option. If your year that you're printing the forms for is the older of your two open 1099 years, you do not need to worry about checking this box off. If you're unsure which is which, you can open the 1099 calendar year control screen. So you notice here it'll list what is the current 1099 year and what is the next 1099 year. This screen is what's used to purge the oldest 1099 year and roll them forward 1 year. And you have to do this in order to print checks for the next year. So if you're trying to process checks for 2020, you will need to come in here and make sure we purge the oldest year first and make sure 2020 is one of your two open years, or the system will give you a message alerting you so. When processing here to purge these years, you just want to make sure you set the option to purge oldest year and then click the begin processing button. I just caution you to make sure you only click that begin processing button one time. Also, I would advise double checking what the two open years are in here. Sometimes multiple people are responsible for the sort of process. Maybe someone else has already ran it. Someone else comes in here not knowing that, just opens it, sets it to purge oldest year, and clicks begin processing. So just double check what the two open years are. Make sure we only click begin processing once. And what this does then is it's getting rid of the oldest year information. It's going to cycle the vendors to the new year, leaving the new year open. In our example, if we ran it here, 2018 would go away, 2019 will remain, and then 2020 will be open for new information for us. If you determine that the 1099 information is maybe not accurate, something needs tweaked, maybe you had a vendor that wasn't flagged as a 1099 vendor for the whole course of the year and they should have been, maybe a voucher didn't get coded with the 1099 box number that it should have and that voucher's now been paid, whatever the case may be, you can come into the vendor maintenance screen in initialized mode, and we're able to edit these amounts on a vendor by vendor basis. Again, your user must have access rights to be able to use initialized mode in the vendor maintenance screen to be able to make these modifications. My screenshot here shows the vendor maintenance screen loaded while in initialized mode, and you'll notice that the two columns of data on the bottom half of the window, those fields are enabled. Normally these fields are grayed out. They will accumulate totals as you issue checks to these 1099 vendors. But while in initialized mode, these boxes have become enabled, and we can come in here and modify the values. Any changes you make directly in these fields, these values are what's pulled on the 1099 forms when you print them. As far as generating an electronic file for your 1099 information, that is done in the Generate 1099 Electronic File screen. This will create the file that contains your 1099 amounts that you can then submit electronically to the IRS. And you can generate for either of your two open 1099 years. So you'll notice in my screenshot here, the top left corner has the calendar year selection. It shows you your two open years. You would choose which one you're creating the file for. Some fields that are required here are, let's see, we've got a vendor PIN number and contact information. So if there's any questions on the information that's submitted, they have someone to reach out to. The control code at the top, that one comes from the IRS. Most of the information here populates from the company maintenance screen in SL. So if something looks off, track that back to the company maintenance screen, make sure your information is accurate in there. But you can also change it directly on this window before you generate the file. So just double check, make sure everything looks accurate there. Now, some common 1099 processing issues that we see. One would be the system message 532, and this one can be received if you're trying to print checks and the check date year is not yet an open 1099 year. For example, let's say we're now in 2020, you're issuing your first check of 2020, and the check date obviously has a 2020 year on it. If our two open 1099 years are still 2018 and 2019, you will receive this error message, printing your AP checks. So you would need to go to the 1099 calendar year control screen, choose the option to purge the oldest year, go ahead and begin processing in there. That'll roll your 2 years forward, making 2020 an open year. You will then be able to issue AP checks to a check date of 2020. Also, if 1099 balances are incorrect for a vendor, you can use the initialized mode to correct them in the vendor maintenance screen. You can do manual corrections in there. Sometimes the integrity check option to rebuild 1099 balances is an option for correcting as well. It just depends on what type of scenario you've encountered. If you happen to run into a situation where the current 1099 year gets purged by mistake too many times, you can reach out to your partner or Microsoft support for assistance with some SQL updates that can be used to reset the years and rebuild the 1099 amounts for those years. So there are options of resolving that. Just feel free to reach out for assistance if you need help in that area. So that wraps up my presentation for today. If you have any questions, as Valerie said, go ahead and submit those in the questions pane on your meeting console window, and we'll take a look at those here now.
There are a bunch of questions in there, Melanie. Please, everyone, look at the question pane. If you can't see my answer, please let me know because it's in purple. I'm not sure why. But there are some in there, Melanie, that I did not answer.
Okay,
and also everybody on the call, if you go to your handouts, if you go to the handouts portion of the GoToMeeting bar, there is the PowerPoint presentation that Melanie just went over with you. I uploaded it there, so you can download it from the handouts if you would like to right now, so that you have it handy. Again, the presentation will also be on our YouTube channel. So do you see the questions, Melanie?
I do. Are the ones you've answered, have you deleted those out?
No, I hadn't. I was just leaving it there to make sure that they got the answers.
I'm not sure I'm seeing where they've been answered. If you want to just read anything you have not yet answered, I'd be happy to.
Okay, so it says where we load the payroll tables. Should we also load the deduction type? Can we leave it unchecked during import?
So when loading the tax table updates that Microsoft provides, we typically do not want to select everything in there. In specifically noting to the year-end updates and the 4 new tax tables there, we would want to make sure you're selecting to load the federal tables. But it's important to make sure that those match up to tables that need updated in SL, and those match up to the deductions that you're using specifically.
Okay. Has the 1099 form changed? And I can answer that. Not to our knowledge. As of now, there are no 1099 changes, but that doesn't mean that that can't change by the end of the year. But as far as we know, there are no 1099 changes. It says, how do you enter initialized mode?
So initialized mode is accessed off your main Dynamics SL toolbar. On the later versions, there's the SL sale looking icon on the top left corner of your menu. You'll click the drop-down arrow next to that, and you'll see the word initialized mode on the menu. You'll just simply click on the word initialized mode, and that'll put you into initialized mode. If you go back and click the drop-down arrow again, and just look at the menu, you'll see a check mark next to the word initialized mode, and that means you're in initialized mode. I just alert you, be very cautious working in initialized mode because it gives you access to fields that are normally disabled. So if you make you enter initialized mode to make a specific change, be sure that you go back and exit initialized mode. When you are done, you can just simply go back and click the drop-down arrow again, click on the word initialized mode, it'll exit you out of that mode. You can also close out of SL and log back in. I believe that exits you out of it as well.
Also, you can reach out to your Microsoft partner. I'm sure they'd be happy to help you with that as well.
Absolutely.
We will we get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Yes, I uploaded them into the handouts for you. Is there a copy of the recording we can get? That will be on the Plumline website after following this. Are there any other visual aids? No, there aren't. We just had the PowerPoint. The pricing, Ava, I will answer that later. Can the system print 1096 forms?
Does not print 1096 forms, no.
Okay. Are there plans to add the W-4 form in the next year? I believe the W-4 changes were being added in this year's release. Wasn't that in there, Melanie?
Microsoft has made accommodations in Dynamics SL basically to accommodate for the new W-4 form. Dynamics SL does not have an actual W-4 form itself, though.
Okay, but we're making accommodations with the new release?
Correct.
And that will also be included in the SL 2011 if you were wondering that. We are supposed to do the tax update before the year-end update, correct?
As long as you have them in place, I don't think one needs to be in place before the other necessarily. They're just going to be dependent upon one another. So before you run any calculations for the new year, you're going to want to make sure that you have those new tax tables in place. Also, the accommodations that we have in SL to support the new W-4 forms, those are reliant upon the new higher set of tax tables. So we need those in place. The two need to be in place together, but I don't think it necessarily matters which order you put those in.
Okay. Can the system print 1099 interest forms?
SL only prints the 1099 miscellaneous form.
Okay. There is a, where was I? There's a duplication type checkbox during payroll tables import. Did that need to be checked?
That's going to depend upon your setup. That would be a specific question to follow up on.
Okay. And that is all the questions.
Wonderful.
So if you guys have any other questions for Melanie, her presentation on year end, we're going to actually just give you a little bit more information before everybody gets off on some year end products that we have available that you might not know of from Plumline. So just stay on for a couple more minutes and I'm just going to run through some things that you might not be aware that we have, but we do provide a fiscal year update product. So if you are looking to change your fiscal year for 2020, we do have a product that allows you to change your fiscal year. It's a short implementation. So if you are looking to change your fiscal year, we have a product for you. Next product is our 1099 Vendor Accelerator. A lot of people are interested in this because you can update your vendor 1099 status and the default 1099 box settings very easily within this product. You can also load all vouchers and change line items. It has an audit trail for any changes that you're making. It has a vendor check inquiry screen to display vendor checks by year. And you can also change your current 1099 year with a one-step process instead of manual process within SL. So it's a super popular product this time of year, not horribly expensive. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, reach out to your SL partner because 1099 Vendor Accelerator can save you a lot of time. The next product is our OneTime Vendor. If you do a lot of one-time vendor transactions, you know that in SL you have to set up a vendor ID for every vendor you want to process a payment for. So in this product, you can pull up OneTime Vendor as the actual vendor, and then this additional box will pop up where you can just put in that specific vendor's information the 1099 box information, and process this information through to the check printing without setting up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of only one-time vendor IDs. So it's a product that's great for people who do a lot of one-time vendor processing. The next product we have is Vendor MultiRemit. You know, NSL only provides you one vendor remittance address for each vendor. So our product allows you to have multiple vendor remittance addresses for a single vendor. You can set as many as you want up, and on the voucher and adjustment screen, you can choose the remittance address that you want for that specific voucher. So if you need multiple remittance addresses and you're tired of having multiple vendors set up just for a remittance address for that customer, this product is for you. Then the next product we have for you is Prepaid Processor. This is a great time of year to implement Prepaid Processor because a lot of people are tracking their prepaids on an Excel spreadsheet. If you're tired of doing that, you can use Prepaid Processor, set your prepay up in SL, set the debit transactions and credit transactions up, what companies, accounts, and sub-accounts you want these transactions posted to, and then once a month, you can go in and process your prepaid, or 3 times a month, however many times a month you want to. You can process your prepaids, and we'll go and look at your prepaids and process anything that is due that period and post it to your general ledger for you. Get rid of those Excel spreadsheets, bring your prepaids into SL, and make your life much easier. And this product is only, I believe, $5.95. So saves a lot of time for little money. Quick Find is a great product, one of my favorites. I have problems looking information up in SL sometimes, and I don't like to click on multiple screens to find what I'm looking for. This product gives you the ability to look up whatever you would like in the system using the color legend below, and then you can put in, like I like to look for the vendor and a specific reference number, or sometimes the vendor give me everything over a certain amount of money for that vendor, or maybe you don't even know the vendor's name and you just know the amount. You can use the colored legend to look up all sorts of information. It is available for our Core 4 package is APAR, GL, and Project, and then the main Quick Find product includes inventory purchasing, inventory lot, bill of material, and a couple other modules. But you have 2 purchasing options with it, and it saves so much time and makes life so easy. Also, with the Core 4 APAR, GL, and Project, you can export the data from the grid into an Excel pivot table, which is phenomenal. So if you're interested in quick find or being able to find information faster in SL, this product's for you. And I think there's a couple more. I'm almost done. Plumline has partnered with FastPath to provide Audit Trail and Assure. So if you're looking for an auditing tool to be able to use within SL and track any changes, be able to have specific changes emailed to specific people on certain days of the week, this product is phenomenal. It allows you to track whatever specific changes you want to see. It tracks anything, any data changes that happen on your SQL Server. So you can set up specific reports for that. And then the last product we're going to talk about is we do have, those are just some screenshots for you. The last product is our ACA connector that integrates with Integrity Data's ACA module. So if you are needing an ACA reporting tool and you're using SL Payroll, this product is for you. If you're not using SL Payroll, you can still use the Integrity Data's product. So please be tracking your data for ACA, for the Affordable Care Act, and make sure you make it easier on yourself by using a tool to do your reporting. Anything else? I think that's it. Also, we have a 15% off promotion running through the end of the month. This does not include the SL 2011 year-end package. This is just for our standard SL products, but it is 15% off and it's still valid through December 31st. So if you saw one of these products or you're thinking of any of our other products that you would like to purchase, there is a 15% off promotion running through the end of the year. So with that, we are going to end our webinar today. Oh, wait, we have one more question. How do changes impact the W-4 form since SL doesn't support printing of the W-4?
So the changes that have been put in place are to include a new set of 4 higher tax tables. Also, there is a new dependent claim amount in the employee maintenance screen that's taken into consideration during the payroll calculation, and also a message on the employee maintenance screen just advising the payroll clerk as they're setting up employees and employee maintenance and advising them on the correct number of personal exemptions to enter and which set of tax tables to use based on the selections that are made on the employees on those new W-4 forms for 2020.
Okay. Well, if anybody has any other questions, please put them in the question pane. With that, we are almost to the top of the hour. We did all of that in just 1 hour for you. So please have a happy and safe holiday season and look for the posting of this webinar on our Plumline YouTube channel, as well as download your year-end slide deck off of the handouts. And if you need anything else, you can my email and sales@plumlineconsulting.com is on the screen. You can email us anytime and we can assist you. Thank you so much and have a happy holiday, everybody. Bye-bye.